Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I hope you're all doing well out there and life is treating you well in your world. And something I've been reading about more and more at the moment is how the automotive industry is in transformation. And yes, while the sector has made huge strides to reduce its environmental impact, especially with the increase in electric vehicles, the pressure to do more increases every day, and the result is an engineering design process which is of a magnitude more complex than anything we've ever faced before. And a company called Secondmind set off my spidey sensors and appeared on my tech radar because they're on a mission to help the automotive manufacturers navigate this increasing complexity of engineering design in its transition to electrification, especially as they're creating more software than actual hardware. So the technology is underpinned by years of award-winning practical machine learning and artificial intelligence technology, all to design cleaner cars and achieve greater sustainability. But how are they going to do that? And what is the technology involved? Well, buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to UK so we can speak with Gary Brotman from Secondmind. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Gary. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. My name is Gary Brotman. I am the CEO of an AI startup in Cambridge, UK called Secondmind. And I've spent, a little bit of background on me. I've spent the last 20 plus years moving from my original roots in communications. I actually started in PR and found myself on the other side of the spectrum in technical product management. From a discipline standpoint. And the bulk of my career early on was music related. And I made a pivot about 10 years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago, actually. I moved into machine learning. So my background is pretty varied. At Secondmind, we actually pride ourselves in having quite a diverse set of DNA. We don't try to fill templates. We try to fill roles and add to the team based on future potential and different DNA. So my background is kind of exemplary of that. The last 7 or 8 years, I've been focused on machine learning and artificial intelligence. I was the head of AI strategy and product planning at Qualcomm. Today, Qualcomm's entire chipset portfolio is loaded with runtime frameworks and all the tooling for their customers to be able to run on-device neural networks to create AI-powered user experiences. And it also includes specialized hardware that they currently have embedded as well. That was what I kind of kicked off at Qualcomm and has made it, I think, right now across the entire portfolio. But my background also includes working with artists like David Byrne and Peter Gabriel to help them sell music directly to their fans and set up their own online businesses outside of standard retail. So quite a bit. I don't like to sit still. I like to learn new stuff. And Secondmind actually has kind of accelerated that quite a bit since I joined.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. Music, PR, AI, machine learning, the incredible David Byrne and Peter Gabriel thrown in there too. So I've got to ask, can you share your origin story? And by that, I mean, what was it? Can you remember that moment where these worlds collided for you? What lit that spark and passion for technology? And ultimately, what put you on this path of artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Origin story. I always try to think back to what was the real, where was the center? Where did this all begin? If you look at the intersection of things that I've been passionate about, I'd say that when Fraunhofer allowed the MP3 codec to be released into the wild, well, allowed, I guess you'd question whether that was the case, but when MP3 compression became commonplace and the internet accelerated the distribution of that codec and also the distribution of music files as MP3s, I think that was the starting point for me as far as where my my passions for technology as well as music collided. Music has always been a thread for me throughout my life. I played different types of guitar. I played piano. I was a DJ in the early to mid 90s. And I was able to, in my career, take the music passion when music became digitized, went from analog to digital, and kind of bridge those two things together. I think if you look at the intersection of PR, music, and MP3s, and add machine learning on top of that, I think all that happened for me around the same time as the MP3 revolution, if you want to call it that, like late 90s, turn of the century. My first introduction to machine learning was at a company called MusicMatch. They were a San Diego-based outfit that at the time had a great little piece of software that you could rip all of your CDs and create your own MP3s and share them with friends. And they had a fantastic collaborative filtering algorithm that created these really deep and rich music recommendations. We promised great music recommendations in exchange for listeners or users allowing us to pay attention to what they listen to. And it wasn't explicit ratings like stars or thumbs up or thumbs down. We just observed what they did. And the connections between different genres and artists and eras, none of those meta tags mattered. There was really just the relationship that the user had their own personal way with music. And then we combine that with what other folks were also doing in the ecosystem. And I still to this day, I think they have the best music recommendation engine on the planet. Yahoo ended up buying them and added that to their music portfolio sometime around 2004. But that was I think that time period for me was the kind of the mix of everything. And I kept most of that without the machine learning piece going all the way up through half of the time that I was at Qualcomm. And then machine learning and AI came roaring back.
Absolutely love that. And it takes me back, you sharing that, because I was a huge MusicMatch fan back in the day. The difference between that, the choice at the time between that and I think it was iTunes, which was incredibly bloated and slow and sluggish, and MusicMatch for our younger listeners was the preferred option, but for most people, wasn't it?
It's funny that you use two terms, Apple and bloated. Being an insider, MusicMatch at the time, I think when we actually shipped, the MusicMatch jukebox shipped with the second gen Apple iPod. Yeah, we were the Windows solution, and there was also an Apple port, but we were actually viewed as being bloated, whereas the new kid on the block at the time, which was Apple and iTunes, had some. I think it was the Apple fan community certainly carried the message of sleekness and elegance and everything. But yeah, those were the days. And having these conversations and finding folks that still remember MusicMatch, the legacy continues.
And that path led you to Secondmind, which provides machine learning for automotive innovators. But for people hearing about Secondmind for the very first time, can you just tell the listeners a little bit more about the kind of problems that you're solving for your customers with this tech?
Sure. And I'll give you a little bit of an origin story for the company as well, because the Secondmind has been around for about 6 years. And the reason I was attracted to Secondmind was when I was at Qualcomm, most of the work that I was doing was around enabling our ecosystem, our developer ecosystem, and the handset manufacturers that were selling phones that wanted to create these rich experiences for their consumers or customers. The work was very low level. It was like close to the metal, very, very dark. You weren't close to the sun. Whereas earlier in my career, I'd spent most of my time up in user space and actually being a part of delivering an experience to a consumer. And I was craving more of that as I got deeper and deeper into Qualcomm. I was also more of a software guy than a hardware guy. And Qualcomm is primarily hardware. They have a huge software development team, but it's still we're operating at hardware scale and hardware time periods or time cycles. And I really wanted to get back up into user space and the application space and have a more of a direct impact on the end user, the individual or the company that actually is going to take the technology and apply it to a problem. Which Secondmind for me was an amazing outfit with brilliant researchers, a team of crack machine learning engineers, data scientists, and an attitude that the world was our oyster with this great technology that could span many industries and help people make decisions, whether it's in supply chain or fintech or automotive, which was just a great, it was very inspirational, lots of possibilities. But as it goes with many startups, when you have a platform potential, you can also become very fragmented and not have enough focus to drill down and establish and anchor yourself in a given area. And at the beginning of this year, that's what we did. We actually took a look at everywhere we were focused, where our technology was having the biggest impact. And that biggest impact was in automotive, and very specifically around the component of the automobile that is I guess it's the focal point for what is a transition to zero emissions transportation. So the internal combustion engine, which is one component of many variants of powertrains that ultimately get you to electrification or just pure battery electric vehicles, that's where our technology was the most impactful and where we settled in and where we're building the company out today. So really, when you're thinking about how well an engine runs, sometimes you may want to have the maximum amount of power and torque, but you also have to maintain, stay within emissions guidelines and fuel efficiency and any other parameters that in today's world, there are dozens. Our technology actually manages the complexity associated with that. So the car manufacturers can get products and off the line faster in production that are cleaner and better for the environment.
And there's a lot of talk at the moment around digital transformation. And of course, the automotive industry is right in the heart of that transformation right now. And while the sector has made considerable strides to reduce the environmental impact, pressure does increase more and more each day. And just recently with the fuel shortage, etc., there's more and more interest developing into the electric vehicles. But how do you see this unfolding over the next few years?
Well, I don't think that I've never had a crystal ball.
Yeah.
And I think that given the tectonic impact that unforeseen forces like COVID have made across the globe and across every single industry, it is difficult to predict what happens in a couple of years. And in the world of AI and machine learning, things happen so fast that where you think something might take 3 years, it might only take 3 months. I mean, things are moving at breakneck speed. And I have to say, I think you made a comment, and I actually held this belief until I started to get into artificial intelligence, specifically around the automotive industry, and whether it was slow to embrace not just digital transformation, but just completely reimagine the car and the way cars are built. That journey started, long before the intensity around the environment, which has been in the last few years, really took hold. I was impressed when I was at Qualcomm at the industry's ability to embrace computer vision technologies to accelerate the path to autonomy. It was and this is my own perspective, but to see how quickly Detroit, being in the United States, embrace new tech, recognizing that their timelines and life cycles for new vehicles and new systems were typically so protracted. So that, I think what I observed was a faster and stronger desire to move quickly to adopt new technologies and transform the automotive industry. And now there's just increased pressure to move faster so that you could get to zero emissions. You've got engines, internal combustion engines that are still in vehicles and will still be in cars for the next 10 to 15 years alongside electric motors, which would be in hybrids. The complexity that comes with all of that and managing the regulatory and consumer demands is something that current technologies and techniques in production just cannot solve for. And that's where our technology comes in. I think the complexity will only increase over the next couple of years, and practical machine learning, like what we've developed at Secondmind, are really going to be the keys to helping the industry accelerate that transformation to what we hope is a pure, zero emissions future.
So how will Secondmind's technology, what kind of role will that play in helping automotive brands prepare for this future and help keep them up to speed?
I think if you were to capture it simply, is that the technology that we have is both transitional and future proof, if you will. Today, as I mentioned, you still have internal combustion engines in vehicles, even though electric vehicles are certainly taking off a lot faster. And the projection is that they will still be there. There needs to be enough. The efficacy of the technology today needs to help solve for today's complexity, as well as the complexity that comes along this transformation to what is that greener future. And I think that's where we really play. We're not just focused on the future. We're here to help to solve the problems now. We're here to help make the dirty things, if you will, cleaner. And I think that's how we do help the industry prepare. It cannot just be a binary switchover. There's too many infrastructure, power grid, cost factors to enable that. So we're here to help with that transition.
And one of the things that made me excited about getting you on the podcast today was before you came on, I was doing a bit of research, and I read that you believe that electrical vehicles on their own are not the silver bullet, and it's a nuanced situation that the industry needs to think about in the long term. Can you expand on that belief?
Yeah, I guess the silver bullet factor will we no longer have any woes with respect to the environment when electric vehicles become commonplace or ubiquitous. That's going to be a while, and I think it's based on what we're seeing today. It may be sooner rather than later, but we're still talking about more than a decade of a transition to get to that other side of pure electric. And the way in which batteries are made, the materials that they're made in, those are only going to get better. And then there's hydrogen as another option. So I think pure EV is certainly it's a big milestone. But there are, hopefully, especially with technologies like what Secondmind brings to the table, and creative, innovative engineers will come up with newer, potentially more efficient ways to move people and things around the world. But EV is certainly a big step. Pure EV is. But I think we shouldn't be expecting that it's the only thing or that silver bullet.
And something else that I find incredibly intriguing and exciting is how technology will continue to increase as automotive manufacturers begin to move away from creating hardware to software. I mean, that's quite a shift, but can you expand on that too?
Yeah, it's going back to my comment about Detroit and the industry being very much a hardware centered around hardware. The powertrain where we sit today had been for so long a point of differentiation for car makers. And now differentiation comes with everything that is on top of the hardware or over the top that comes into the car, where the industry is focusing more of their business strategy, their investment is in areas like connectivity and autonomy and shared rides and services, and of course, electrification. All of that, there's so much of that is software driven. The car of tomorrow will be like the phone in our pocket today, which is less of a phone and more of a computer. The vehicle will be the same way. Driving is a thing that it does, but it will also deliver entertainment, and the experience within a vehicle will radically change, and our involvement and interaction with the vehicle will radically change. All of that, and the lion's share of that's coming from software. The term software-defined car, and I think a headline that I read the other day was software is eating the car. It is a completely different animal than the 280ZX that I had as a teenager, or the Ford Mustang that I had as a teenager, which had no compute in it whatsoever. And today's car has 100 to 150 ECUs or processors that handle myriads of processes and applications. And because of that, the industry is also having to shift from being a very waterfall centric, in their development process into one that's more agile and software agile development in the way that they operate. There's not a binary view there either, because you're still dealing with the manufacturing of hardware, but the impact that software has both in the design as well as the actual end product itself, it rules the roost moving forward.
And just to bring to life some of the things that we're talking about here today, do you have any examples or use cases that you might be able to share that will help listeners understand how those traditional methods can no longer cope with the multitude of parameters and constraints associated with the increase of hybrid and electric vehicle configurations, and ultimately how you're helping with this with your technology too?
Sure. I think I've probably leaned into this a little bit, but I'll drill down a little bit more into one particular use case, which for me, going back to when I developed an affinity for cars, the two that I referenced were the first two that I had as a teenager. For me, there were two factors. There was power and there was style. But the power factor was one that, just put the foot on the gas and you want to go quick. Today, a manufacturer could, with our technology, manage a number of different parameters and objectives for what the output of that engine or how it should behave and operate. And torque is one that leads to power. And if you want to have the most torque possible, while also staying within regulatory or emission standards and also fuel efficiency standards, or whatever the constraints are that a manufacturer deems appropriate for the design of that powertrain and that vehicle, we're able to cope with those and any that are a priority for the manufacturers. The number of parameters, the number of constraints increase as you increase along with the number of configurations of powertrains. Like I said, you have an internal combustion engine, you have myriad hybrid configurations, and then you have pure battery electric. We're able to cope with all of that seamlessly in one self-contained process, relatively speaking, with the same technology. And with this, we expect that, we hope that the industry will be able to manage more of that complexity that comes with not just that use case, but many others, with regulatory pressures, consumer demands, and a desire and a need to really completely revamp the way engineering design is done today. There is a transformation that comes from this.
Fantastic. And if you excuse the pun, what excites you about the road ahead? Is that anything that makes you particularly excited about the conversations that you're having and trends you're seeing in the industry?
It's funny. I think the things that excite me the most are our team and the opportunity we have to help the automotive industry accelerate down this path to zero emissions and cleaner, better, transportation. We've got an amazing team that has been through quite a bit as we've dealt with COVID. And at the time COVID hit, we were very deeply entrenched in supply chain. And as we know, the supply chain is still having a number of challenges. And refocusing what we were doing on automotive and some of the change that comes with startups, we've got like an amazingly resilient, creative, and I just can't say enough about the team and the ideas that the team is rallied around, the values that we hold dear. We're very purpose-driven in what we do, and it's centered around sustainability, and we're really united around that. And I think that level of unification and alignment and creativity is what excites me, is what comes from that down the road ahead. I'm inspired by these folks every single day and what we've accomplished.
Such an exciting space to be in at the moment. But something I also want to ask you now, as we come full circle, we started the podcast talking about your origin story. I'm now going to ask you, what was the soundtrack to that origin story? A song that's accompanied you in your career, helps you get your head in the zone? If it was a MusicMatch algorithm, it might have said Road to Nowhere, Talking Heads, because we've mentioned David Byrne and obviously a lot about driving. But what would your song be and why?
Well, I love Road to Nowhere, and I'm a huge fan of David Byrne. If there's one that really is the one song that helped me get through the early stage angst as a teenager and the geekiness and weirdness of me and how I adjusted to the world, and really, I guess, exemplifies the different points in my career where I've moved from one industry to the next, or I've gone from one discipline and evolved that, like from PR to product management. And even at Secondmind today, the one thing that is a constant has been change. And David Bowie is my all-time favorite musician. May he rest in peace. And Changes is my go-to.
Wow, what a great choice. I'll be adding that straight to our Spotify playlist. Great reason for choosing it as well. But before I let you go, for anyone listening, just wanting to find out a little bit more about anything we've talked about today, look up Secondmind, contact a member of your team. What's the best starting point?
I think the best thing to do, you could go drop by our website at secondmind.ai. We also have, I think we have a YouTube channel. We're fairly active on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well. So just look for Secondmind, and also Secondmind Labs, which is our research arm. We have both properties, or both of those are avenues to check us out.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today about how the role of technology will continue to increase as automotive manufacturers move away from creating hardware to software, and the role that artificial intelligence and machine learning will play in that. But more than anything, I think it's your story that brought it all to life today, and also ending with that great song choice too. So thanks so much for sharing your story with me today.
Neil, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Huge thank you to Gary for discussing the technological innovations and how the role of technology will continue to increase as automotive manufacturers move away from creating hardware to software. And with artificial intelligence and machine learning at the forefront, it's also great to hear how we're gradually leaning to new approaches like digital twinning and simulation-led manufacturing and creating a new future of automotive. But if this is an industry you're working in and electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles are a passion of yours, please, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, and you get me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc., all at Neil C. Hughes. I'm the easiest guy in the world to find. All I ask is if you do hit that follow or connect button, put a little message alongside it. Let me know that you listen to the podcast so I can respond accordingly. But that's it for today. So a big thank you as always for listening to the podcast. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.